So it is deadline day, and to state the obvious, it's literally Congress's job to fund the federal government. So it goes without saying that Congress, with the help of the White House right now, is not doing its job, since they are now barreling toward a shutdown if they can't agree on a spending deal by midnight tonight. This would be the first shutdown since December of 2018. That one lasted 35 days, making it the longest government shutdown in more than 4 decades. We can talk about the politics of all of this for hours. It's clearly all politics, but let's break down what a shutdown tangibly means for, well, you and millions of Americans. First off, hundreds of thousands of federal workers do now face the threat of mass layoffs by the Trump administration. We haven't seen that during any recent shutdowns. Members of the military would be forced to work without pay over the duration of a shutdown, and not to mention the hundreds of thousands of employees who will likely be furloughed from the federal government and not paid until this thing is over. Major government programs will be impacted. The FDA is warning food inspections and drug manufacturing sites, they will close. They also warn that the safety of the food that your family gets, the way they're putting it is, quote, would be significantly impacted. And then you have the U.S. Travel Association. It is warning of flight delays, longer security lines, and canceled trips because of potential staffing shortages, as if airports didn't have enough issues on their hands already. National parks and museums, they may also close. The Park Service lost $400,000 per day during the most recent shutdown. Something to remember here, the longer a shutdown goes on, the more critical programs and benefits start to run out, like SNAP benefits, which is often known as food stamps, or WIC, the Supplemental Nutrition Program for women, infants, and children. They will start running out of remaining funding and may be unable to provide food for children and parents in need. Yes, the outlook is bleak when this thing drags on, but not everything shuts down. Essential services, they're kind of considered. The IRS will stay open thanks to funding that Democrats pushed in the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022. Visas and passports, those will continue to be issued. Most Justice Department staff would stay on the job. Social Security checks, which is always a big question, they will still go out. FEMA response, NOAA forecasters, they will remain on the job. Veterans care and veterans services, they will also continue. Yes, that was a lot to unpack and could all be solved simply by Congress doing its job. But the biggest point here is the more prolonged a shutdown is, the more uncertain the funding becomes for services that reach farther and wider. Sarah?
That was a really good breakdown. And we should also mention that President Trump has threatened to make it more murky that mass layoffs, permanent ones, could happen with federal workers as well. So we will see what happens. And as you said, this is literally Congress's #1 job, which is to fund the government. Thank you so much, Kate. All right, today, the Senate is expected to vote again on that Republican-backed bill that would keep the government funded for 7 weeks. GOP leaders say there will be multiple opportunities to keep the government open. Democratic leadership met with the president for the first time in his second term, and no deal. CNN's Alayna Treene is joining us now. Alayna, the blame game is getting really, really nasty. The president leading the way, posting a racist fake video of Democratic leadership saying things they have not said. What are you learning as to where we're going here?
Yeah, I mean, if that video is not a sense, Sarah, of just how far apart the two sides are, I don't know what is. I mean, look, I think what happened yesterday, the president finally saying that he would meet with congressional leaders, specifically, of course, the Democratic leadership in the House and the Senate, was a way for them to try to show really what their message is, what they're trying to communicate to the Americans, which is we are willing to negotiate, but not with the threat of a government shutdown looming over us. And that really was the message we heard when they left. Clearly, the meeting yesterday at the White House did not go well. We heard from Republican leadership, including the vice president, trying to describe what Democrats are doing in their eyes as hostage taking. Listen to how the vice president put it.
You don't put a gun to the American people's head and say, unless you do exactly what Senate and House Democrats want you to do, we're going to shut down your government. So I think we're headed to a shutdown because the Democrats won't do the right thing. I hope they change their mind, but we're going to see.
Now, look, Sarah, I've had many conversations with people in that building behind me about all of this. And I can tell you, specifically when it comes to President Donald Trump, he does not view a shutdown as bad messaging for Republicans. And this has kind of been the case now for several days as it became clearer that this was likely where Congress was heading. The president and a lot of people in the West Wing believe that a shutdown will get blamed on Democrats. That's typically how this works when, they are the minority party in Congress. However, of course, we have to see. I mean, a lot of people recognize as well that Republicans control not only the White House, but both chambers of Congress. But there's also people, and this is what I find to be one of the most interesting aspects of all of this, at least when you thrust the politics into this, is a lot of Republicans and specifically people closest to the president believe that it could be good politics for Republicans as it comes to the midterms, if they can look at really trying to blame Democrats over all of this. And so there hasn't been a lot on the White House's part to try to change things. Yes, they want to avoid a government shutdown, they argue, but they also recognize it could politically benefit them in the long run. Of course, we have to see whether or not that's actually the case when the shutdown is likely to happen in less than 17 hours from now.
Right, and how it impacts the economy as a whole as well. We will see what happens. A lot to unpack there. Alayna Treene, thank you so much. John?
All right, here now, Senator Jeff Merkley, a Democrat from Oregon. He is the ranking member of the Senate Budget Committee. Senator, thanks for being with us. What's the latest you hear from your leadership about the negotiations? Any chance that a shutdown is avoided at midnight?
Well, there's always a chance for a temporary reprieve of some sort. But here is the framework. The Republicans passed this big, ugly betrayal of a bill that does enormous damage to American families to fund tax breaks for billionaires. And Democrats are saying, hey, we're not going to sign on to more of a families lose, billionaires win agenda. We want an agenda where families thrive and billionaires pay their fair share. And the focal point really has been two things. One is health care, because very, very shortly, folks are going to be facing double-digit increases in insurance, and on those buying on the exchange in Oregon, it'd be a 65% increase, or about $1,300 average per family per year. This is an enormous impact, with some families having to pay some $13,000 to $25,000 more per year for health care. So a big looming disaster ahead on health care. We're saying we're fighting for families. This has to be addressed. And the second, John, is the power of the purse. The president has been wrenching the power of the purse away from Congress through funding slowdowns, funding freezes, funding impoundments, and this fancy thing called a rescission, where they basically, in a partisan way, undo what was agreed to on a bipartisan basis. And that's unacceptable. It's contrary to the whole vision of our Constitution and the checks and balances. So those two factors loom large.
You know, the first thing you said is there's always a chance for a reprieve. I spoke to House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries last night, and I asked him about just that. Listen. What about a 7 to 10 day short-term funding bill so that you can keep talking about this? It would keep the government open for the next 7 to 10 days, and maybe you could keep talking more about Obamacare subsidies and the like.
We are a no when it comes to kicking the can down the road. This issue needs to be dealt with immediately.
That sounds like a no from the House side on a temporary reprieve. What do you think about that?
John, that sounds pretty definitive. But I do think if you were to hear a message from the president saying, we hear you, we are going to start honoring the Constitution on the power of the purse. We're going to work out the details. We hear you on health care. We're not going to inflict this massive damage on the American people. You have, and Vance said yesterday, the Democrats are presenting ideas that have some value. Well, if we heard a strong, we'll take a couple days to work out the details, but you presented two important issues and we're going to address them, that would be the only foundation for a short-term reprieve.
Interesting. It does seem like you're leaving the door a little bit, certainly more open than Hakeem Jeffries, for whom it was completely 100% shut last night on that. Your state's in the news, right? Because President Trump says he's sending National Guard troops or federalizing National Guard troops for Portland, Oregon. What's the situation on the ground there? How would you assess the level of violence that the president sees compared to what it normally is around facilities like that?
No, I was outside of the ICE facility twice this weekend. I saw 3 women protesting. There's been a couple of incidents over the last couple months, but nothing with outside of the normal function of police. Portland has, among the 68 largest cities in the country, the largest drop in murder rate in the country. It has a 20% drop, in fact it's been cut in half, 20% drop in violent assaults. And Portland is pretty calm and peaceful and recovering, and business has been coming back downtown. We've been recovering from the riots that Trump incentivized and stimulated back in 2020, and we're like, stay away. And my message when we held a press conference on Friday night with all the leaders was, it's the don't take the bait press conference. The president is planning to distract from all the terrible things he's doing across the country, 8 months of making the country sicker and poorer, and he wants to distract with this type of stimulation of violence that he can then use violence to justify more authoritarian control. So this is outright straight out of the authoritarian playbook. Portland, don't take the bait.
Senator Jeff Merkley from Oregon, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.